Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the High Performance Health Podcast. I've got Chris, Scott, and Colin with me today, and we're going to be discussing trusting the process and also the importance of focusing on the micro behaviors in the day. It's the accumulation of all it's the accumulation of all of the small things. So let's start off with trusting the process. It's a term that we hear bandied around in the fitness industry all the time, and I think it's one thing that is absolutely worth kind of driving home with all of our clients and anybody that's on any specific journey. I always use this expression, there is no 6 week diet or exercise program that is going to undo years of poor lifestyle choices and bad habits. If you walk 10 miles into the woods, you're going to have to walk 10 miles to get back out. And I think it's one point that's really important making towards all of our clients. I'm sure you see this all the time. People join the program and go, I want to lose 25 pounds in 3 months. And I say to people, stop focusing on the end result. The most important thing for me isn't focusing on the end result. It's actually unpicking years of bad habits. And for some people, it's like a click of a finger. Some people, they're a little bit harder and it takes a little bit longer. And I think ultimately setting yourself a target of 25 pounds in 3 months, if you don't make that, that's a negative and that creates this negative feedback loop. So Chris, what do you think are the biggest mental roadblocks people face when trying to trust the process in their fitness journey?
Well, you touch on a lot of good points there. Yeah, like the walking into the woods is a really good saying. And also people will come into a program or a gym setting and they'll be like, I want to lose or I want to squat 200 pounds. And I was like, yeah, sure, maybe we can get to the 200 pounds, but let's see how you go with just the empty bar first. And of course, that's not the sexy, cool thing you see on social media. But everyone starts at zero basically and pushes on from there. Success isn't built in huge leaps, it's little tiny steps put together. Greasing the groove, doing things well over and over and over again. Again, this is stuff people don't really want to hear, but this is just the way to do it. So if you were to come up against a big roadblock like, oh, I fell off in the past, I jumped in on this 4 week accelerator, slimming tea, lose lots of fat program, and I didn't get there, or I got close to, and then I slingshot right back. Um, you're better off on focusing, hey, let's look at our habits. Let's hit the gym 2 to 3 times a week, and let's see, can we do that consistently over 4, 5, 6 weeks and see where we're at then, how we're feeling, energy levels, hormonal balance, all these kind of things, and not always looking at aesthetic results. So just focusing on the sort of little micro behaviors, the little wins day after day, the little things that we sometimes maybe take for granted can really just get you right over any roadblocks you might have faced in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me actually of a conversation that me and Scotty were having this week. I think you messaged me about people just obsessively focusing on the number on the scale
Yeah,
rather than
one thing,
anything
yeah,
else. Yeah.
yeah.
What other health markers would you point to that I think are more important than just obsessively focusing on the scales, Scotty?
Well, on the subject of you talked about someone comes in the program wants to lose 20 pounds, right? 20 pounds, depending on where they're coming from, 20 pounds could be a long way in the future. So you have to have a status of small, manageable, and actionable goals to get there. So rather than just stand on the scale, which can fluctuate 1 to 2% anyway on any given day, you got it. That's why we talk about things like body measurements, photographs, getting your body fat actually taken, whether it's an in-body scanner or calipers or bod pod or something like that. All of the markers that we can use, that we can put together with, regardless of just looking at what's on the scale, because you may put on a little bit of weight when you train initially if you're putting on muscle and you're losing a bit of fat, but as long as you start with it, trust in the process, those goals, you have to make them small and actionable on a day-to-day basis in order to get anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, I had a guy the other day. He's come into the program and he's 88 kilos and he wants to lose 20 kilos. That's a huge amount of weight to just throw out there. And another guy that's come into the program, he wants to get single digit body fat and he's at about 17, 18%. In 6 months, that's a very difficult thing. So you have to think, what are the small micro behaviors that you can do every single day to achieve that rather than looking at this end goal? Because you said it yourself at the beginning. If they don't get to that point, which is very difficult to do, if they don't get there, that's a negative thing. It's a disappointment.
Yeah, it really is. I had a client message me yesterday, and I think I shared this with the group. Somebody that's over the last year has lost 32 pounds. They've added 4 pounds of lean mass, and they've also lowered their body fat by 15%. Now, this was an executive Mayo physical, right? This isn't just standing on the pair of body fat scales at the gym and seeing that you've gone down. So we could focus, a little bit less on the number of the scales gone down and go, wow, you've added 4 pounds of lean mass. And this is somebody in their 60s. And also you've lost your 15% on your body fat. These are huge health markers. Um, in terms of sort of how do you help your clients stay motivated, Colin, when they're going through sort of periods of negativity and if they're not seeing the immediate results?
Yeah, I think like you say, with the problem being that people want the result, but they want it as fast as possible because it's like I just need to get to that end destination. Like, okay, well, what next? Well, I'll probably just go back to what I was doing, and then I'll be back to where I started soon after. So, but at the same time, it's hard. Like one thing you mentioned right at the start is getting people to trust the process, and they're not going to trust the process. They're not going to do the daily actions, the consistency, unless they are confident in the destination that they're getting to. And so it's important to have that outcome goal of I want to lose 25 pounds, but then we need to create the process goals of well, what do I need to do to get there? Just like you would in business terms, you know, and I know the um, personal trainer world has adopted these SMART goals, which obviously came from business, where you want to break things down into specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and then have a time on it. But you need to also get goals to complement each other. So we have the outcome, but then I need the process as well. So what am I going to do every day to take those steps? So it's the same idea. If you want someone to stay motivated, is they have to know what the destination is, and I have to have that plugged into my maps of this is where I'm going, and then I obviously need the actual steps to get there, and then you just need to follow that day to day. But without that, people find it really hard to commit to the day to day. They'll do it some days, but not every day, because there's no consequence for me slipping off because I don't really know where I'm going anyway. So I think yeah, you have to have that, those complement each other. You have to have that north star that you're working towards, and then you have to that helps you make that right decision every day to continue with the process.
Yeah. I think people come into this program, I always say they want to change, but when you tell them the little things they have to do, they're not actually really prepared to make all of those sacrifices. What would you say? I'd be interested from each one of you guys. I don't mind who answered the question, but what would you say, what would you suggest would be the daily actionable goals that people, because we're not asking somebody to climb mountains here, right? We're actually just asking tiny little things. So what would you say are some of the kind of little actionable tasks that people can do on a daily basis to get to where they want to be?
Well, like,
Uh,
sorry, Chris,
sorry.
go ahead.
Um, like one thing that I do first thing in the morning, drink a glass of water. Kickstarts everything in a positive way. I start to like make my breakfast a good breakfast, a mindful, intentional breakfast. I look at the day ahead, see what's going on. I'll take a quick walk, get out in the fresh air, even if the weather's absolutely terrible here, which it normally is. Um, at the end of the day as well, I'll make sure, okay, I'm getting into bed 8 o'clock, like that's non-negotiable, because the next day ahead. Also I'll look at my protein levels, and I'll try to limit my screen time, especially being an online coach and then phones and screens and everything. So I'll try get rid of the screen altogether when work is done and try and stay off it as much as possible. Um, I will charge my phone downstairs away from me, distractions. So these are all positive little things I make throughout the day, and that's not even to mention my training. And I've only briefly touched on the nutrition, but a big one for me is the water. First thing, downstairs, no matter what's going on, get that water into you, get your body kick started and going. Um, yeah, so they're just a couple of things I would do. Fire away, Scott.
Yeah, I was going to agree on the targeted water intake in the morning, but also the things that don't cost you any money. So things like 60 seconds to 2 minutes of basic breath work in through the nose, out through the mouth, 2 or 3 stretches for a lagging body part that might be a bit tight, looking at your step count, sticking about 100, 200 steps a day on something like that. Things that don't cost you any money. You don't have to invest anything in them except a very small amount of time.
I think something I've been doing with some clients lately is, like say, when people are struggling to get that momentum, it's creating a daily five of 5 things you're going to do, obviously every day. But the key to it is, and the mistake people make is they set ones that are ones that I want to be able to do every day, not ones that I'm actually going to be able to do every day. And so let's say, for example, okay, steps is one of them. And I look at my average, and currently I'm probably only getting about 5,000. Well, there's no point in saying I'm going to do 10,000 a day because I'm not. So I want to set it up, okay, can I do a little bit better than what I'm already doing? So maybe I'll just set it at 6,000. And it should be things that you should be able to do this every day, regardless of what else happens, unless you have a day that's completely out of the ordinary. But if it's just a regular busy day that comes up, then it doesn't matter. This should be something you're able to do every day. And the mistake again, or where people always fall down, is like, oh, well, this came up and I wasn't able to have my usual lunch, or I wasn't able to have my usual dinner prepared. We ended up going out for a business dinner or whatever. So one of the things I have to do every day is I have to plan my meals for the next day. Or if I'm going to planning on training in the morning before I go to bed, I fill up my water bottle so it's ready for the morning, and I get my gym bag ready so I can go straight to the workout. And the same, so it's setting yourself up for tomorrow to make tomorrow's easier, which again most people don't prepare, and that's ultimately where you fall down. So again, if you can set 5 things you can do every single day, no matter what, then again, you're increasing your chance of being successful tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. And it's that compounding result which is going to get you the big result in the end.
I
It's not,
think that's
training three times
that
a day.
expression as well, that compound effect
Compound interest, yeah.
is where people fall off because, and I would probably include myself in this in the past, especially since I've become an online coach and I've focused, my step count was through the floor last year. I was averaging like 5,500 steps a day. And I thought, what's the point in going out for 10 minutes? It's not going to make any difference. But all of a sudden, I started adding in sort of a couple of 15-minute walks a day. And my steps right now is at 14,505. And it's 2:30 in the afternoon. It makes such a huge difference. It might only be an extra 1,000 steps a day. But if you break that down, if you do that every day, that's an extra 365,000 steps you can do over a year. When you compound that together, that is a huge amount of distance that you're covering, which can equate to, I don't know the math, but it could equate to a significant drop in weight if that's your primary goal. I think for me, I've adopted this kind of sort of 5 pillars, and I go sleep first, hydration second, activity third, nutrition fourth, and exercise would be fifth on my list, which people might find a little bit strange given the job that I do. But I think it all starts for me. If you don't nail the sleep the night before, then everything falls off. Everything very, very quickly falls off a cliff. So I think Andrew's mentioned this as well, learning, and you mentioned it there, Chris, learning to shut down electronic equipment. Phone goes down, laptop goes down, 2 or 3 hours before you finish work. And I think a lot of people use that as an excuse, because there's always going to be work to do. I'm sure all of you guys finish at nighttime going, I probably could do another hour. But it's learning to create barriers, isn't it, from your personal life and your work life, and seeing how much your work life can significantly interrupt what you're trying to do here, because this takes a little bit more of your focus. Why do you think people give up so quickly on their progress, and how can we kind of push people through that, Scott?
Too much too soon. I'll give you an example of a guy who was on the program last year who's no longer on it. So this was the first week I remember I had a note about it. Train 3 times a week, overhaul nutrition plan, 10,000 steps a day, schedule reading, 15 minutes a night. I tried to get him off that one. I forget what the next one was. Wanted to use blood glucose monitor. This was all in the first week. Protein intakes, supplement stack. This was all in the first 7 days, regardless of everything else. And it was always going to fall down. Sure enough, he had a bad deal at work. Everything went belly up. The whole thing just came down. So once one went, it was like, what's that game where a Kaplunk where you pull the straw? Once one of them went, the whole thing fell down and he didn't
It's
do
like a
anything.
Jenga tower.
Yeah, yeah, like a Jenga tower. So too much too soon, I would say, from that
Yeah,
example.
I agree with you there. And I say this to my wife, if somebody comes in and tells me they smoke, they drink, and they eat takeaways 5 nights a week, she's like, well, you got to get them to stop everything. I'm like, no, no, no. Let's just focus on one. If they can not have 5 takeaways a week, but they're still smoking, they're still drinking, it's like, yeah, but let's deal with one piece of the puzzle at a time and be consistent because we know it takes quite a long time to create new habits. So it just has to be something like Colin mentioned, it has to be something that you can repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat over time. Okay, that I think in terms of trusting the process is, unless you guys have anything else to say, I've got a load of stuff to discuss in regards to sort of focusing on the micro behaviors a little bit more in depth. So, um, how do small sort of daily habits kind of impact long-term weight management more than short-term dieting, Colin?
Again, just building up the habits, you're just less like, so again, we'll use a client as an example. So he's on the program 3 months, I think, and he's dropped, I think it's just around 30 pounds now at the moment. And it's true, just he's developed the understanding when it comes to nutrition in terms of calorie budgeting. He plans ahead to where he knows, okay, we have a meal coming up this way, or I have something on with the kids this day, I have a work event this day, or I'm traveling these few days, and he accounts for that. And then it's obviously consistent with the workouts, always trying to increase them as well. So he's just come back from vacation for a few days, and his weight's pretty much stayed the same. And he didn't track that week. We didn't train. It was an off week because he was on a deload week. And again, his weights stayed stable. And we had the discussion of because he's developed these habits now. This is just stuff he does now every day. He always stays active, does his workouts. Again, he understands his nutrition. So even if I'm not tracking it, I still know what's an excessive amount and what's a reasonable amount. And so he's in a position now where it's highly, highly, highly unlikely he will ever go back, 20, 30 pounds heavier because he can address it so quickly. If he does put on a few pounds, it's like, yeah, I expected that to happen because I was enjoying myself. So, but I have the skills, I have the tools now, and I have the habits built into my daily life to be able to just, get back on track, get the momentum back, and then keep moving again. So I think it's, as you say, sometimes I think people fall off because if they're only doing small things every day, they're not seeing that big win straight away to where, they're not getting that feedback, positive feedback to where, um, all these sacrifices are worth it because the progress is so small. But like I say, if you can develop them over the long term, you're just set for life then to where you're never going to go back to where you were.
Yeah, the more you do it, the more you learn it, the better the education, right? So you just don't drop off as quickly. I've had this with guys who have sent me menus of what should I eat in this certain restaurant. And one guy in particular now, he just knows what the best option is after a month. It's kind of become self-explanatory to him. So he doesn't need me to choose for him anymore. He just goes on and ping, 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 logs it up on the MyFitnessPal and, he's off.
I do think as well, though, one tool that I always utilize with a lot of clients is like you just mentioned there, Scott, having picked a food that you're going to have from a menu, I think is a really great habit to adopt. Pick it before you go. You don't need to see the menu. Because I don't know about you, I can quite happily choose a healthy option at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when I'm well rested and I've had plenty of food that day. But if you get into a restaurant and you're tired and you've had a really stressful board meeting in the afternoon and somebody gives you the menu, the choices are probably going to be a little bit more skewed towards having something a little bit that's less good for you, shall we say. All right, there was one other thing that I wanted to mention, and it's completely left out of my mind. We've got a couple of minutes left. Is there anything else on sort of the micro behaviors that you guys wanted to mention before we finish?
Just one thing is again, you can't just white knuckle it, and it can't be all just, I'm going to just sacrifice. You have to make your life and your environment easier. So don't go, again, talking to a client there, he was just saying how now whenever we get or order food in, we always order from somewhere that has options. So I can have either rice or the salad. It's like, I'll pick the salad. Same thing if you snack late in the evenings, don't have high calorie dense, highly palatable foods in the house. Again, if you can control yourself, brilliant. But if you feel like I keep slipping up, then you need to remove it and you need to make your life easier. You need to have foods like that as well, just somewhere that's mildly inconvenient even for me to get it. That again, it puts a slight barrier to me doing it, as opposed to if it's within reaching distance, I'm going to keep reaching for it. As again, you can't just keep white knuckling it. So we need to just create them habits and that your daily structure just to be aligned with what the goal is.
Absolutely. It
JC,
says,
I call it glove box nutrition for some of my guys who are on the road and don't know what to choose. Put a David bar in the glove box, something like that, something that's a decent option. And then at least you've got one there, right? It's always there. Or the office straw.
I've got a statistic here actually from the University College of London, found that habits are built on, they aren't built overnight. On average, it takes about 66 days for a new habit. So I think the one thing that we can take from this is don't try and throw 5 new habits into your life. Try and be consistent with one. Can you get to the gym 4 days a week? Let's get that consistently first. Can you then start thinking about preparing your meals 5 days a week? Let's try and be consistent with that. Can, when you go out for a restaurant and in the evening, make sure that you're making a healthy choice. Let's try and practice that. Let's make sure that we're shutting all electrical equipment down 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed. Whichever ones that you think, everybody's goals might be slightly different. They're all going to be kind of leaning in the same direction. Everybody's will be slightly different. So it's not about ultimately, like you said, Scott, with your client who wanted to move everything in one 7 day period. Think about what's the most important thing for you. Think about what is letting you down. It could be something as simple as folding your gym kit on the floor at the end of the bed for when you wake up in the morning, so you know your gym kit's already out. It could be something as simple as that, right? It could be something like keep your magnesium complex next to your toothbrush in the evening so you remember to take it, right? Make these things easy, as Colin mentioned. Don't white knuckle it. Awesome, guys. Well, I've really enjoyed that. Thank you everybody for listening. And we'll have a great week. All right. Take care, guys. See you soon.
Thanks, fellas.
Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.